Hello and welcome to 4 aspects of effective document collaboration and change management in Microsoft O365. First of all, my name is Nathan Austin. I'll be presenting today, and behind the scenes and producing is Stephanie Kingsley. I always like to do a little shout out on if we're doing this on a Wednesday where we're wearing a pink shirt. We have a little cultural aspect of our organization that we call Pink Shirt Wednesdays. So it helps to know what day we are of the week we're working in. So that's why I'm wearing a pink shirt, even though not too many people are in the office for me to see it, to see it. So anyway, thanks for joining us today. For those of you who might be joining us again, we are re-recording this session, unfortunately, because we had some, myself, as well as several other folks had some technical challenges yesterday. There was a major internet outage that happened. So anyone that had that provider was affected, and that was had rippling effects for everyone else. So thanks for joining. Today is an advanced session. I want to say that up front so that for those of you who are looking for more basic instructions, this is building upon several other pieces. And so I don't want you to get frustrated as we go through it, because I'm going to jump over a bunch of little details to hit the more advanced components. We do have other recordings that highlight some of the more basic sessions on which this is built. And we have a session that's later, which is actually tomorrow, Thursday, the 23rd, where we're actually going to then build upon it more at an individual user level, like an individual person on your team that might be interacting with this information and how they can optimize their experience. So this is a bit of an advanced session. If this isn't applicable to you, no worries, but eventually this is something that we've seen a lot of organizations have to deal with. We found some methodologies that we've done a lot of work on this to try and put something in a prescriptive manner that can be really helpful. Lastly, before we really dig in, there is the Q&A panel open on the side. We will have about 30 minutes of prescriptive content, and then we will open it up for Q&A. But at any point throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please go ahead and enter them into the Q&A, and that way you don't forget the question, and we can start covering it right away at the conclusion of the session in about 30 minutes. So again, thanks a lot. So let's dig in. So the 4 aspects of effective document collaboration and change management. This is going to be a very prescriptive how-to. There's going to be a couple options that we show you, and this one's also going to have a little bit of process into it, because some of the work that we're going to show you is actually less about the structure and more about the process and the methodology and the internal organizational decisions that you make in order to align the structure to those decisions. So we'll walk through that. But we will show you how to marry some of our recommendations into the Teams and Office 365 structure relative to enabling change management. So we're going to do a quick key components of document management. This is some of the process side that we talk about. We're going to do a brief review because this is the session that we recorded earlier. Ended up having a 30-minute session and 45 minutes of Q&A around the basics of file collaboration. So we are not going to be diving in deep there because we have already an hour and 15 minutes of recorded where we dig into that. But I am going to do a quick review. And then I'll get into demonstrating the team structure and kind of some process around some of the change management that you can choose to employ in O365 or not. Finally, some quick recommended action items, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So stay tuned. We have a 1 minute for my tech really quick. I always like to cover this, that we are not a training organization. The reason why we do these sessions is because we serve the small and medium business community. They typically don't have internal IT people to become experts and really help them with this. And so this is our way of helping our clients use the tools that you're already paying for, because we want you to be able to use those better. Over 20 years, we've learned a proven IT strategy that we know can achieve consistent results. And in the end, that's oftentimes what people want, is that I want to know that it works, and I want to know that I can get results out of it. And so, and we know that we can't remove all of the challenges that we face as businesses. However, our goal through collaboration with you is that at least we can remove some of the IT challenges off your plate, take those off your plate so that you can focus on the highest and best use of your time. And as we proceed through that, the way we coach our team and encourage our team is to try and make IT easy for you, our client. We don't always succeed. We are not a perfect organization, but that's what we strive for. And if you feel we're not doing that, we hope you give us feedback so that we can improve. And by working with our team and collaborating with you and building plans and implementing a proven IT strategy, what we found is our clients can achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments. So if that's something you're interested in, you want to explore further, please contact us. But for this session, enough about MyTech. Let's dig in. Okay. Some of the key components of document change management. So these are the 4 areas that we've identified. Again, the first couple are really more process and thinking. So first and foremost, if you think about your organization as there's different domain or subject matter experts, sometimes that's a department, but sometimes it might be product development. Sometimes it might be a specific application. Sometimes it might be ownership of process. So there's different areas that might have subject matter. It could be product offerings too. So if you think about the different subject matter experts or domains of authority and align it to, well, who in your organization really is the ultimate accountability and or approver of that information. And that's really the kind of the start. So we'll dig into that later, and we have a template that might help you think through that and define that. But starting there. Secondly, is say, okay, well, if we're going to be collaborating around that, what's the method in which we as an organization want to employ to collaborate and to work on change management? What's the authorization process? Looking at the goals and the tools you're going to use, how are you going to capture it, document it, and process it? So define that first, understanding that. Again, we have some examples of information that you could maybe get you started on that process if this is where you're at in your organization and a problem you're trying to solve. And then once you've kind of defined some of those first couple steps, is creating an appropriate place based on how you've defined the process to go for your change advisory board, as oftentimes referred to as called a CAB, your change advisory board team, to be able to collaborate. And the CAB methodology, by the way, that we've employed and that we're using and that you'll see today is not a MyTechism. We actually subscribe to a framework that is persistent in the technology space. It's called ITIL, I-T-I-L. It's IT Information Library, and they have a prescriptive process around change management and using the concept of a change advisory board to authorize and approve changes. So a lot of what we're showing to you today is not just about something we figured out. It's a framework to which we subscribe, and we've been able to figure out how we can model it in the O365 tool. So hopefully that's beneficial. And finally, once you've collaborated on the change and you've approved a change, now you need to release it into production. And one of the things I think that a lot of organizations, I know we haven't always done a great job of this, and we probably need to still be better at it, is once you produce and publish something, well, did you tell people that something changed? So there's some things you can do as far as saying, look, identify where to publish it and what's the communication methodology that you want to employ to make sure that the team members that need to use these technologies or these tools or whatever new content has been put into publication or production is ready to go. So those are kind of the 4 key components. I'll show you some of the templates on the first 2, and then the last 2 are really the demonstration that we'll show you in O365. So before we dig in, this is the brief review really quick of the basic document collaboration. So we did a session that's out there on our website in our YouTube channel that covers this in much more detail. But the idea is that there's multiple ways that you can share information across chats or the channels or in SharePoint. There's multiple ways in which you can edit those documents. You can edit them in Teams, in the browser, or in the application. And then once you open documents up for editing, there's multiple ways that you can suggest people edit the documents. Do you want them to do live edits, so where they're making changes in real time in the document? Or do you want them to use the comments feature? Or do you want them to use the track changes feature, for example? So we recommend prescribing when you're asking for feedback, prescribe the method of feedback that you'd like. Finally, there's also some version control. So we went into some of this. Again, we spent a whole session on this, which we're not going to dig into today, but know that everything we're covering today is based on also you defining and choosing these methods and defining them inside your organization as well. So with that said, let's move on. So this is, now I'll show you how some of the team structure as well as some of those templates that I was talking about. So if you go into, I'm opening up Teams now. And so I basically, one of the things that we decided as an organization is that we actually created a team called Change Advisory Board. I know, really creative, and then what we did is we created, and this is our demo tenant, so these aren't Mitek's actual teams, but just to give an example, we actually created sub channels that are of the respective areas of so we're looking for of the domain subject matter expertise and things like that. So this is where we are storing what we would call the master documentation, and I'll show you some of these an example of the document I'm talking about, where we store the master documents, and this is where we edit and collaborate. So in the general channel, though, we actually have saved kind of the instruction set. So I talked about defining the way to work together. So I've actually opened up each one of these documents. So I'm going to open up the Excel document, for example. So that first area that we talked about is identifying your domains or subject matter experts. This tool is it's a simple one, but it helps you think through what I'm talking about for this first step. So first of all, we decided that we're going to put in a team. So this is where the Change Advisory Board team is going to be the master team. And then we decided, well, what are our different areas of subject matter expertise? And these are just examples, as I mentioned, it could be a primary application, it could be a specific like accounting system or accounting department, it could be a sales department, process improvement. Again, these are just to plant some ideas as far as what are those domain authorities in your organization. And sometimes to be able to define these, it helps to think through this, what we call a RACI model. And this is oftentimes used, you can Google this isn't a Mitekism, but I also sometimes feel like it should be called the ARCI model, ARCI instead of RACI, but RACI just rolls off the tongue a little easier, is that ultimately there's only one person that's accountable. And so that's where this column comes into play, is who in your organization, needs to be a person, is ultimately accountable for these respective areas, subject matter expertise, right? So that's the A of the RACI model. And then it's saying, well, who do you want to be responsible? And responsible just means they may be responsible for executing or collaborating, but they're the key members where you're saying, look, this is the group or the subgroup of people that are ultimately responsible for the collaboration and the creation and iteration of documents and process and methodology relative to their subject matter expertise. So again, responsible, you can have multiple people responsible, but you really only should have one person that's accountable. And then finally, the next area is consult. So we actually have identified over here, for instance, these are people that we do recommend consulting with. You don't have to necessarily, but in general, it's saying, hey, we do want to consult with these folks. And then finally, the inform. We didn't define the inform here, but basically the inform is, which is also the last phase of communicating to your team, is that whomever is impacted by these respective areas is who you should inform. So that kind of defines it for you as far as what the I of the RACI model looks like. But if you think through this, and sometimes thinking through who's accountable and responsible helps you define this a little bit better too. That's one way to start. That's the way we recommend starting the process. And then, so for instance, I created another tab over here. We'll share this information as being able to download. I know this isn't a complicated template, but it's just something that can help you internally think through the conversation and the thought process. Okay, so that's step one. If you remember going back to in the PowerPoint presentation, when we really talked about this section here, is we just really covered kind of this section here. So now what I'm going to do is say define. So there's two documents that I'll have around defining that next step. So we basically put together this Change Advisory Board team guide. So, for example, I'll just read the first sentence. We noted our use of Teams gives us a streamlined method for accountable staff, or of specific tools and areas of the business to manage change and collaborate with others. That's one of the problems we're trying to solve. So we start by that and kind of go through the details of, well, what is a change request? What is not a change request? Just helping give people information. What are the kind of things that are applicable to change requests? Different types of documentation that we might encounter through this process. And then finally, one of the things I like to say, this definition here that I like, that's really applicable, I think, to this session, is that documentation will be managed in two categories. master documentation that I referenced earlier in the change advisory board team, and then production documentation. So once we've deemed something to be released to production, to be published into production, we still keep the master files, but there's the master files from which we iterate, and then there's the production documents that we release into production that are the formalized new versions that we want our team to use. So this is just an example of a guide that you can, that we'll share this as well, but that is an example of providing instruction. The other one, it's a simple one as well, is we basically built out a one-page process map saying here's how we have defined our process to work, and sometimes complementing a Word document version with a visual helps. And so as we start, with team CAB collaboration, which these are some of our CAB teams that we have at MyTech, and then we move over to, hey, did this collaboration, was the output of that collaboration a document version change? Yes or no? If it's yes, then we actually need to get the changes finalized and ready to move to production, and I'll show you some of this in the process. In production, actually, and actually using Teams and SharePoint to do this. And then we come down here, we actually want to complete or either update the change request that was submitted, or formally create a change request so we can actually track the changes. We do this in our ticketing system. You might do this in an Excel spreadsheet or some other documentation method, but this is what we've chosen. And then we basically want to say, hey, are those changes? We need to make the changes. Let's move them into production. And then an important step here, make sure that we train and or communicate any of the changes that are made, right? And then it goes right back into the feedback loop. And then we go around and around and around for continual iteration. So again, this is just a simple visual that we use. So we use this document as well as this guide for our CAB members, as well as this is how we kind of thought through the CAB teams and really were prescriptive to that information. So we've taken these documents, and in Teams, we've shared these in our Change Advisory Board general channel. So you see that these instructions are here. Okay, so now what I'm going to go is to the, as we've looked at this, we've talked about this section, and now we're talking about creating an appropriate place for Change Advisory Board team members to collaborate. So opening up Teams, we've created this team here, the general channel, and I'm going to use an example of client engagement because I've saved some files here. So we've actually posted some files in the client engagement section, and these files are from which to iterate, for example. So I'm actually going to open up one of these documents I'm actually going to open up in the browser. So I'm going to click on the little ellipse here, open up in Word Online. That's going to open it up in the browser. And this is just an example of something where I want to use comments. I'm going to turn on comments here, and I'm going to say, hey, I want to make sure that, oh gosh, I want to change this this section here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit new comment and say, like to change this for the next iteration. Right. One of the things I like about using comments is that it also allows anyone else on our team to mention or reply to this specific comment, and we could be collaborating without actually making changes to the document. So, but the point is that by having it in the Change Advisory Board section, that this is a place where we can be making those comments and be making those edits or potential edits before we release them into production. So we get to choose when we move this document and or any of its changes into production to be the production document for the rest of the team. So that's part of what this Change Advisory Board team has done. It's created a safe place so that we're not going to create confusion for our team, but yet allows the right people in your organization to collaborate. Okay, so let's say that we've resolved this issue. So I'm actually going to right click on this and say, you know what, we resolved this one. It's been done, so we've updated that. It's one of the ways you can also track as you're doing feedback on these, which is kind of nice. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, I've actually already moved this over to our production environment. So the team, so we've collaborated on this document, and the team, actually, I'm going to show you one other thing, forgive me. I want to show you one other piece. So we're in this section. I'm actually going to open this in SharePoint, and maybe I could have done it from Teams too. I haven't tried it that way, but I'm going to show you a cool little capability that exists in SharePoint. So I can say the purpose of quarterly, that's the one that I just edited. And so I'm actually going to go in here and I'm going to say, you know what I want to do? I think we're ready to release it to production. So I'm going to click on the ellipse and I'm going to go down here to automate and I'm going to do a request sign off. And I believe you can also do that from up here. Oh, darn it. I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to click on open. I'm going to close that. I want to select it here. And I believe I can also go up here to this menu up here and I can hit request sign off. So you can do that a couple places, either the ellipse and go to automate request sign off or up here. So I can hit request sign off. Shoot, by clicking that, it stopped that process. I can hit request sign off. And this is actually a workflow that has been created. And so it's going to allow me to say, who does this go to? This is, I'm going to send it to myself, for example, as I'm the owner of this team, is to use this illustration, say, hey, please review for sign off, for approval, so we can release. Thanks. Client engagement. Okay, I'm gonna hit run flow. So that's an example of what happened. Now I'm going to flip over my Outlook. I've already tested this. It does take a couple minutes for this to run, but this is basically the email that I receive as an approval. So I can automatically kind of do that. And then I can come in here and click approve or reject, or I can open up the document itself and review that. Here, the new one just came in. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes, so I didn't want to wait for that. But here's the approval that just came through, and I can come in here and say approve and say, yep, looks good. Nate. Should probably capitalize my name and click submit. So basically all within email and the automated approval process, we can actually go through and submit those approvals. So it's kind of a cool little workflow capability that you can build in the as you're ready to get it into production. Because if we're operating virtually, we may or may not be in a meeting where we've all kind of said, yes, we're ready to go into production. And it could be something that I, as a manager on the team, might see something and I can put some edits in here and say, hey, I'd really like to get this into release quickly. And so here we go. Just got the flow notification that this has been approved up here. So it's one of the ways that you can, if you're not having a regular meeting on that, or if you are, but it's in between meetings and you want to get something released, it's something you can do by going into the ellipse and clicking automate and request sign off by building that flow. So all right, so now what's happened? Forgive me, I know I'm going quickly. Now what's happened is that we have approved a document in a master file and we're ready to go into production. So what I've done is for our client engagement, these documents are going to go for our sales team. So I moved up here. We've chosen for this example that we're going to publish these documents into the sales team general channel. So that's where these documents exist. That purpose of client business reviews, I basically converted that document into a PDF and I uploaded it here. You can drag and drop it or click this upload. And now these documents are available. So I'm going to open up, I'm going to see if I can do it here. I cannot. I don't see the ability to do a workflow from Teams. So notice I click on the ellipse and that automate option is not here. So I am going to go into SharePoint. And so I'm going to give you an example of what you can do on the SharePoint side when you publish a document. We've chosen that this is where it's going to go. And so when we publish the document, I can actually come in here and build an automate flow. And I'm going to say, for instance, I want to create a flow. And this is going to be cool. So it's going to pop open a little window around this side, I believe. It should. Power automate. Create a flow. Yeah, here we go. Sorry. So it gives me some options over here to be able to create a flow. Like, for instance, send a customized email when a new file is added. I've actually already done that. And then, so for instance, I'll come up here. This is what that looks like, is send a customized email when a new file is added. And basically allows me to create a workflow. So when I add a document, I can automatically notify the members of the team that are there. So, and then you can actually go into my flows, and this is one of the ways that I've done that. And so I can say my flows here. It gives me, here's that flow that I created. I'm going to click edit. And this is just where I can customize that email. I can actually come in here and say, I can add some notes here and it automatically populates this for you. So I'll give you a quick example because I've already tested this. this is the email that I received from that flow earlier when I added this new Word document. It says, hey, Nate, because it's inserting my name or Nathan, I added a new file, a new Word document, and it provides me a link to that document. So if I want this email to look any different, that's where I can edit it here in my flows. But that's an example of when I was in the SharePoint site, all I did was hit create a flow. I hit send customized email, and it pulls this open, and it allows me to actually create the flow. It does. It allows me to actually create the flow. So pretty cool capabilities to automate some workflow. As that way you don't have to upload the document and remember to communicate, but this is one of the ways in which you can do that. So now we've actually shown where to publish production documents and how to communicate. But I'm going to show you one other thing in Teams before we wrap up, and that is that this is the primary way in which we have going through lots of different machinations and iterations of how we really want this to work for our organization. We chose to use the majority of our documents that are released to the organization. We're creating a change advisory board team where everyone that's on this team, regardless of what subsection or subdomain they're a part of, has access to that area so that they can collaborate, provide feedback or input. But again, only the people that are part of this change advisory board group are the primary people responsible for those respective areas. But we wanted to be able to allow anyone that's part of this group to be able to potentially be pulled in to collaborate or offer feedback. So that's one of the reasons why we chose to use a team structure where everyone has access to these sub-teams. Another way, though, that might be more applicable for you, and we actually have identified a couple of other areas of our business where we've done this too, is that there might be a team, for instance, like a business continuity team, where instead of having the change advisory board down here, this is actually, we created a private channel that ends up being the change advisory board team or the CAB team for content relative to business continuity. So that might be another option for you, is that you really want to restrict this to only the people that are members of this private team or private channel, excuse me, that could be the change advisory board relative to publishing content just inside of this channel. So that's just a couple different ways, either using a change advisory board team structure where you keep the master documents, and or you might consider where the change advisory board for a respective area of your business might be a subset or a private channel of that team. And all the same methodology and process works. It's just, that's just a couple different key ways to work through that. Another option, instead of, you could choose to publish like into a general team. The other option I've seen is that it might be that you look at your all company channel and maybe you publish content that's applicable to everyone in your organization up here in the all company channels, and maybe create sub channels that are, that are for those respective areas of the domain. Because part of this is creating clarity for your team on where do they go to find the right information relative to what they're finding. And so by thinking through that structure, it might be that you choose to publish it to a respective department team, for example, or it might mean that maybe you publish it into the all company team and create sub channels for those respective areas of domain authority. Okay, so we went through that quickly. I'm gonna do a quick summary here. We've covered all these key components, right? Where to publish, and so I'm going to go into here are the summary. Really, you want to define the teams and accountability, and I recommend, sorry about that, I must have clicked back. Define the teams and accountability and complete that Excel template or something like it in the RACI chart. That'll really help you. The mental exercises that you go through to complete that is a really great beneficial place to start. You want to prescribe the method that you want to use for change management. Are you going to use a private channel? Do you want to use the change advisory board team like we described? Maybe you have a different tool altogether that you want to do. Maybe we use our ticketing system to capture and document the changes. Maybe you want to do something different. Just define that and really understand that. So I'll share the publish the team guide as well as the one-page kind of PDF of our process. Create the right collaborative space based on your definition and how you prescribe that, and then agree on where you're going to publish certain content. So where should production content live, and how do you want to make sure that you're either doing team notification to changes or training your team if it's a significant enough change to warrant that change. So with that said, really making sure that everyone, you understand the problem you're trying to solve. right? Part of it is you're trying to create clarity for the people who are the accountable members of your team for the domain authority. Part of it is you're trying to be, how can we do a better job as an organization of collaborating on changes that we want to have rolled out. And then the last one, which is maybe just as if not more important, is that creating clarity for your team on where they should look to find information, because there's so often we hear from our clients and other organizations we work with that your team struggles to find the right information in the right place. And so this will help you think through that whole process and create clarity from front to back. So if there's a couple takeaways you can take away today, I encourage you to write them down. And every organization is at a different stage of maturity relative to this process. This is a more advanced process for advanced people that have been probably using O365 for a while. But if this is one of those key problems you're trying to solve, and wherever you're at, try to take whatever your next step is in the next few days. So whether that's scheduling a meeting to collaborate, whether that's reviewing these templates, whatever those things are, wherever you're at in this journey, try and take your next step in the next few days. And again, as I mentioned, we have the recorded sessions that will help build a foundation that could be training for your team. We also have future sessions. We're actually going to be going into, like I said, the session on the 23rd, which is tomorrow, is going to be about how this impacts the individual user and how they can optimize their experience. And then we have future sessions getting into the flow or the Power Automate that I just showed you, as well as Power BI and some other things that can help you drive adoption of these things across your team. So thanks for joining us today. Appreciate the indulgence since we had to re-record this session. So this is Nate from Pink Shirt Wednesday saying thanks for attending. And Stephanie, let's open it up for any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Nate. There are no questions in the panel as of right now. So if anybody has them, go ahead and post them in there.
All right, very good. Well, I'll give someone a hint for those that are there, just in case it's something that we encourage our team to do, and I'll give you a couple examples. So one of the things that when you publish these documents, so for instance, we're in a sales team, we publish those documents, as I mentioned, to the sales team general channel. You click on the files tab up here. So these are the production documents we want our team to use. A couple pieces, for instance, we chose to publish this to a PDF. We chose to publish these other documents as document templates. So notice it's a DOTX versus a DOCX. And so that means that this is a document template. And so if I open this document, for instance, I'm going to open this in Word, and notice this title is not going to be what shows up. So I'm going to open this in Word. And when I open it in Word, it's going to show document 1 up here. Oh no, it's not doing that. It's showing as read only. Well, because it's showing as read only, I'm surprised it didn't show it up as otherwise, but it doesn't allow me to overwrite. So in order for me to actually customize this, I need to do a save as. So that's one of the things that I recommend. So when you actually publish this information, is publish it either as a document template if you want to enable your team to edit it, but that'll force them to do a save as. Notice it opened up as read only. Or publish it as a PDF if you don't want them to be able to edit. So that's one of the tips I would recommend. Notice I'm going to come down here to the master files. The master files are not document templates, they're DOCX, which means that these are editable versions. We want them to be editable versions because that's the whole point, is these are the master files from which we are going to iterate. When we publish them, as I mentioned, for using these as an example, we publish them as document templates or PDFs. There's one other tip really quick that I'd recommend. So for instance, one of the things that people like to do with these templates is they end up saving them to their desktop. And so because the people like to be used to being able to use their File Explorer, for example, be able to use their File Explorer for these to access these documents. So what I'm going to show you, I'm going to sync this information. Notice there's a little button up here that says sync. It exists here. You can click it here, but I'm also going to quickly open it up in SharePoint. Again, notice that button I just clicked. I just said open up in SharePoint, and it opens up these exact same files in SharePoint. And the sync button also exists here. So I'm going to click it here just to illustrate what that does. And this is a preview of what we're going to cover tomorrow, by the way. So I'm going to say, yep, go ahead and open that up. It's getting ready to sync. It's saying you're syncing this. Great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up File Explorer, which I have open. And so if you want to see what happens now, and I'm going to pull this off to the side, snap that to the side, is that these documents that exist here, I just, you'll see, notice how this is showing that I'm syncing this little building icon here, means that I'm syncing it from my corporate SharePoint site. So I'm in the sales team general folder. So it shows the sales team general folder here. When I click on that, I've got the same exact documents that exist here. Now I can basically access them via my file explorer, which is what most of your team is probably comfortable with, and I have been doing for the last couple decades in using this technology. So this is a way to help your team have quick access to it, especially when we're operating virtually. This is a great way for your team to click sync and have this information readily available to them instead of having to log into SharePoint or instead of necessarily having to open it in Teams. Either way works. It's all the same information. It's just that this might be if you can sync the documents that are ones that you use on a regular basis, depending on your role, it can just help you get quicker and easier access to that information. So that's a little tip and a little bit of a preview for the session tomorrow as far as what we're going to talk about to help your team access and use this information and optimize their experience. All right, Stephanie, I tried to stall for a little bit. Any questions that have come yet?
No further questions.
Okay, awesome. No worries. I know this is a repeat, so we weren't expecting a lot. But thank you all for attending today. Thank you for those who are watching this in the future. And through everything that we're going through right now, I hope everyone stays safe and stays healthy. Thank you.